Welcome, GTS retail partners. We're very excited this morning to have on with us Will and Oz from Privateer Press. They'll be talking to us today about Warcaster, as well as some of the other lines that Privateer produces. Riot Quest and Monsterpocalypse, War Machine, and Hordes are among them, and we appreciate their being here. But first, let me just go through a quick, if you're not familiar with Zoom, this is the system that we use for our webinars. If you hover over your main video window there, you'll see that a list of options is opened up at the bottom, and among them is the chat window. If you click on that chat window button, you'll be able to type a message here on the right-hand side of your screen in order to address either all panelists or all panelists and attendees. If you just go to all panelists, that's just for Will, Oz, and myself. And if you go to all panelists and attendees, then everyone will see it. So you can decide which one is appropriate for your message. Today, I'm Scott Bohr. I'm the GTS category manager for gaming specialty products, which includes game accessories like dice and dice trays and all those fun things that go along to accentuate your game, as well as miniature games and role-playing games. So today, we've got, like I said, Will and Oz from Privateer Press. They're going to be talking to us about Warcaster and some of the other lines from Privateer. And as a special gift, those of you attending live will also receive a Warcaster Weaver Solo, as it's an alternate sculpt model not available through normal retail channels, as a special gift for attending. So without further ado, I do want to hand the virtual microphone over to Will and Oz to talk to you today about the wonderful products available from Privateer Press.
I feel like we should have done one of those YouTube video things where somebody hands something to somebody else off of the frame and the other person grabs it and just have our microphones ready. That'd have been a cool little gimmick. Yeah. Hi, I'm Will Hungerford. With me is Oz, as we mentioned. We're both developers here at Privateer Press. I am lead developer. Oz is the development manager, so he is my boss. And we've worked on basically all the games, War Machine Hordes, Riot Quest, Monsterpocalypse, and the new game we're going to be talking about today, which is Warcaster. To wind things back a second, to start from the beginning, if you're not familiar with us, Privateer Press has been in business for over 20 years now. We started back in the day with the IKRPG, first with Witchfire Trilogy, which was in 3.5 D&D, for those of you who remember it. Very popular product and sort of spawned an entire world setting, which was the Iron Kingdoms. The Iron Kingdoms, in turn, really grew into what has become known as our flagship game, War Machine and Hordes. War Machine and Hordes is a tabletop war game, a hobby game where you build up your armies, you build your miniatures, you paint them up and get together with a friend and you beat on each other for a little bit. And it is definitely blown up over the years to be, one of the big names in tabletop wargaming. Most people know us just for War Machine Hordes, but there's a lot of other games that we've made. We've done a lot of card games like Infernal Contraption, Heap, Bodgermania, and then we've had great success with a variety of board games, Level 7 Escape, Omega Protocol, Widower's Wood. Recently, we've put out 2 hobby board game hybrids. So a lot of people also remember Monsterpocalypse from back in the day, back when it was a pre-painted blind buy, booster buy game, where it's giant kaiju monsters fighting over a city. The game's played on a map that is your board. There was various maps released, and you would collect your sort of agenda if you were protectors or destroyers or whatever individual factions like giant monkeys or giant robots you wanted to play. Well, we re-released that, what was that, Oz, last year or year before?
2018.
2018. Now as a hobby miniatures game, where you get, the players don't blind buy anymore. They know exactly what they're buying. The miniatures are bigger in scale, much more beautifully detailed because now they're made out of metal and resin versus the pre-painted plastics, and people are allowed to paint up their own. And then we put out Riot Quest, a new, very casual, very sort of zany, fun hybrid board game where players create a crew of 5 to 6 models. It's very hero based, almost like a MOBA, for those of you familiar with League of Legends and games like that, where you build your crew of heroes and you fight with up to 3 other players. It's up to a 4-player free-for-all game. A ton of customization, and then all the models in that work in War Machine and Hordes, so that every player who buys one of the Heroes for Riot Quest gets a lot of good value. But one thing amongst all these games that we've made over the years is, aside from War Machine and Hordes, we had never made another tabletop war game. War Machine and Hordes was always our one tabletop war game. Everything else was, like as I mentioned, hybrid board games, card games, RPGs, things like that. So Warcaster, which releases in August, is our second ever tabletop war game. And it's also going into a genre that we've touched on a bit with Level 7, but Level 7 was more modern and futuristic. You had, commandos and soldiers from the government. Warcaster's full-on futuristic, set 5,000 years after the events of War Machine and Hordes. There's going to be its own narrative, its own storyline, but there'll be hints for people that were fans of War Machine and Hordes to kind of connect a couple dots. That said, there are no direct correlations of factions between. So if you have War Machine and Hordes players, there's not going to be Space Signar or Space Khador. We're not going to have Space Russians with fuzzy hats. Every faction in this game looks completely new and completely different. The setting of the game is across 1,000 worlds. And basically humanity has spread across the stars, fighting over a very unique resource to this galaxy. And as always, when the resource starts to run low, the wars get stronger. So everyone is fighting over all these different planets. And what that does for the players is the type of tables they'll play on can be anything. A lot of sci-fi war games will do this, where you can have almost that old Star Wars feel. You can be on the ice planet, you could be on the forest planet, you could be on the city planet. Whatever they want to do, their imagination is the limit. Any kind of tables they want to create. Now, we are approaching this game very differently than War Machine and Hordes in a lot of different ways, and it's also sort of built on the foundation of all the information and experience that we've gotten over the last 15 years of War Machine and Hordes. It's a very modern game in terms of design. It's also very easy to collect for a new player. Often an army-sized game can require a lot of an upfront investment to play what the players would consider to be the standard size game, right? There'll be starter products out there, but in a lot of stores, a lot of clubs, a player can buy a starter product and then all their friends are playing whatever the tournament meta size game is. We're trying to address that to make sure that the starter products are a legitimate way you can play the game, because there's going to be 3 different sort of formats we intend to support via organized play in terms of your army size, and they will have their own unique scenarios and ways to play them. But we'll get to that a bit more in a second. So what is Warcaster in terms of gameplay? It's got a lot of really unique elements to it. For starters, when you show up, you're going to choose what size game you're going to play, skirmish or full size. So everything in the game, whether it's a squad of soldiers, and most of the squads are 3 models, whether it's a solo, which is a single model, or whether it's a warjack, which is also a single model, is considered a unit. A skirmish-sized game is between 4 to 8 units. All of the starter products we're going to be talking about in a bit, they come with 4 or 5. So they get everyone what they need to play right out of the box in a skirmish level event. If they wanted to go the max level of a skirmish event, which is 8, they would only have to buy a handful of blisters. Full size is 15. So this is somebody who's playing for a little bit and has decided to collect a larger force. When you play this game, you choose your force ahead of time and the unit you'll have available, but almost nothing starts on the board. A lot of war games that we play, whether we're playing old Napoleonics or more current popular ones, is that you deploy your army on the board and then your opponent deploys theirs, and we sort of march in, we play the scenario, we fight against each other. We're trying a more of an almost command and conquer StarCraft RTS approach. And what I mean by that is throughout the game, you build these gates. There's a limited amount of you can have of them. Your opponent can disrupt them. You can put down new ones. Your models start off the board, most of them. And as you play, depending on how powerful your gate is, how charged up it is, the amount of resources you've allocated into it, and the amount of resources your opponent hasn't taken off of it, you can summon in your miniatures from off the table near that gate. And then those miniatures in turn in later turns can place down more gates going further up the field. Whenever a unit is destroyed, it goes back in your reserves. And later on, it can be resummoned on the battlefield. The idea is that you, the player, are controlling the Warcaster. You're in a giant spaceship watching over the battle, and that you're just teleporting troops down onto the battlefield. So one unique aspect this also leads to is that this is not a game that can end by somebody being tabled. You're not going to play a game with a new player where they get their first demo, they play against a more experienced player, and somebody just wipes them off the board because they've been playing for longer, and then they can't come back in. You can always come back in. You can always summon more things. It really is a game about maneuvering and tactics and fighting little pockets of attrition, because we are going to use the entire table space. This is not something where we're just going to come meet in the middle and fight over the center of the board. This is a game where every aspect of the table space should be used as players are fighting over the scenario elements, whether they are static or, in many of the scenarios we've created, they're dynamic, where the players will want to travel to different parts of the table in order to fight. Speaking of tables, there's the skirmish mode and the full-size mode. So skirmish mode is played on a 30 by 30 inch battlefield, whereas full size is 48 by 48 inch. The reason we chose 30 by 30 for the small in particular was because not every game store out there has the space to dedicate to a bunch of 4 by 4 tables. We totally understand that. Just looking at the stores that didn't have the space, and what they did have is almost every store had room to run Magic events. So a 30 by 30 will fit on almost any Magic table that you have set up. So if you're capable of running Magic the Gathering events or anything similar, then you should have space to put down 30 by 30 mats to allow players to play. They'd only need a little bit of extra space off to the side, and that's really just to hold these models in reserve that we were talking about. So let's take a look at the contents of one of the first starters. So here in one of the starters, this is what a player would get to start playing. And again, a player could buy this at your store, build it, whether you're running a hobby event at your store that day or build it and come back later. And this is enough to play in a skirmish event right off the bat. They get a warjack, which is that larger model you see in the background. They get a squad, which is going to be the models, the 3 models to the right, and then they're going to get 2 solos. In addition, they're going to get all the dice they need to play, all the stat cards they need, and a rule book. Also, all the tokens they'll need. So the one thing you might see is that the dice are not regular D6s. These are the white, blue, and red strike dice that are being used in both Monsterpocalypse and Riot Quest. Basically, these are dice that either have a blank, which is a miss, a single hit, which is a strike, or 2 hits, which is a super strike. White dice have more misses. Blue dice have a little bit fewer misses results, and red dice only have 1 miss result. This allows us to play around with probabilities and what we can do. Now, Warcaster only uses the white and the reds. Monsterpocalypse and Riot Quest will use the blues, that's why there's no blues in this photo. The thing is, if you have a player who's already playing Monsterpocalypse or Riot Quest, and they have these dice, they don't really have to worry about getting even more dice if they want to, a lot of players like to buy a larger dice collection. They'll probably already have more, and they'll be usable between all 3 games. The set also comes with a single D6 because I believe like the starting roll is resolved by a single D6, and a couple of the scenarios will have dynamic elements of you have to go to this spot or this spot, and they're numbered 1 through 6. The D6 resolves things like that, but overall it's not used for the actual gameplay. A big element, speaking of gameplay and building your force, is customization. So in War Machine of Hordes, when you bought a model or a unit, especially a warjack, it just came as it was. The kit you bought, the plastic or metal kit, might have been able to build multiple versions, but you built it a very specific way. That had this head, these arms, it looked however it looked. The warjacks in Warcaster are all fully customizable. Left arm, right arm, sometimes shoulder-mounted weaponry, the type of head they have. There's a hard point system, and weapons have different point values. So this allows players to buy, say, the same jack 4 times and have it kitted out 4 different ways if they wanted to. This is going to lead to a lot of magnetization over the models. Now, the models don't come with magnets, but they were engineered in mind that magnetization would be something that players would do. So if you sell rare earth magnets or drill bits in your store, it's going to be a really good add-on because any player who wants, say that you buy the single chassis, they want to try out multiple versions of, it's got its railgun this game, or it's got its flamethrower this game. Once it's glued on, it's glued on. So we expect to see a high percentage of players doing this so they can swap out specific weapons or different shoulder-mounted items just for a little variance between games. Doing it is fairly simple. It's as easy as drilling into the socket of the model, like say on the right shoulder where it's flat, and putting a rare earth magnet, then drilling into the same spot on the arm, putting another magnet, and then they just click together. Also makes painting it a lot easier as you can paint the weapons separately. Customization of warjacks is something that the players have been asking us for War Machine Hordes for quite some time, and it's been built into the DNA of this game. So this is going to be something that's going to carry on throughout the entirety of Warcaster. Now, these starter sets you're looking at, the MSRP for $69.99, and again, they get everything that one player needs to start playing. The model on the farthest left of the image we're looking at right now, the one holding a staff up, it's called a Weaver. So if you're familiar with War Machine and Hordes, you know the one way that game ends is that you have a Warcaster model that's on the board, the general of your army. And in addition to the scenario victories, if that model ever is killed, the game's over. It's your king and queen in chess. It's the most powerful piece, but also as soon as it dies, that's it. Some people love that mechanic, but some people, you know, it's a great comeback mechanic. But some people, you know, it wasn't their cup of tea. We're not using that in Warcaster. In the game Warcaster, you, the player, are the Warcaster. You're the godlike entity, this Omega level mage who's in the ship directing the entire battlefield. You were viewing the war beneath you as if they were small figurines at your disposal that you were using to fight another war. So there is no caster kill in this game. You can only win or lose based on the scenario, and this is a purely narrative scenario-driven game. Now, these Weavers I was mentioning, one thing they do is you have a deck of cards called your rack. It's full of cipher cards. Players get to customize these as well. And these are sort of the individual powers that you as the Warcaster have. Spells, like futuristic arcane spells that you can cast. But you don't really cast those like directly from the ship. Often you have to channel them through someone, have sort of a conduit to relay your power. And these Weaver models are just that. Some spells you can absolutely cast just from the ship and make a unit shoot farther or make them disappear from the battlefield. But if you want to hit somebody with, you know, lightning or a giant fireball, it has to be channeled through one of these Weavers. Then the model that everyone is going to receive that's watching this right now is going to be an alt sculpt Weaver. So it's not the one in the box, and as far as I'm aware, it's not going to be sold at retail whatsoever. So this is going to be a great model to paint up if you want to show off sort of the look and aesthetic of Warcaster, because it definitely has a very unique look. It's a big departure from sort of the steampunk look. The faction we're looking at right now is one of the 3 factions launching in August. So they're the Marcher Worlds. Now, the 3 factions launching in August are the Marcher Worlds, the Iron Star Alliance, and the Aeturnus Continuum. Always should try not to mispronounce their name. The Marcher Worlds are the fringe worlds. They're the people that don't want to live under the thumb of the Iron Star Alliance. They've decided to go out to the fringe of the galaxy to live their life free of any draconic laws and policies. That means they don't have the best technology. They're a little bit more scavengers, but they still have access to warjacks. You know, people that like traditional rebels, like Rebel Alliance style, we're going to be a fan of the Marcher Worlds. The other faction that's going to be launching is going to be the Iron Star Alliance. This is the giant corporate empire that runs a huge group of planets near the core of the galaxy. They've got access to the best technology, the best resources, but to join the empire, you have to live by their laws and policies. They're not tyrannical, they're not necessarily abusing their citizen, but there's just things you can't do, things that you're not allowed to do for the safety, and some people are not okay with that. Some people want to go do whatever they want to. So you're going to have units like the Paladin Enforcers, which you see on the left side, that squad over there, which are effectively their law enforcement / soldiers. Everything about the Iron Star Alliance is going to be a little bit sleeker, a little bit, you know, more like slick sci-fi versus the Marcher Worlds, which have a little bit of that grungy look. Now, not depicted here are going to be the Aeturnus Continuum, which are a secret cult that are trying to live forever and basically have begun grafting their flesh into robotics. These are your RoboCop body horror faction. For people that are like, yeah, I think living is just a face and a brain for all eternity would be okay with me. That is that faction, and they're trying to operate underneath both of these other 2 factions sort of in the shadows. Their practices are highly illegal, though. And so anytime they're sniffed out, they're often put away either in jail or just taken down. So launching in August are going to be the starter boxes, as well as a selection of individual solos and units and weapon packs, which weapon packs I believe are going to retail for $9.99. And these weapon packs are just going to be additional weapons for the Warjacks for their customization. Now, looking at a game of Warcaster, one thing we're definitely pushing is that this is the game that's going to utilize 3D terrain. This is not going to be played on a flat battlefield with, say, mouse pad terrain. The rules are built in to have things like a Warjack run from one rooftop to another, and there are jumping rules to jump across. Things like climbing up stairs, going up and down ladders. Scenarios that'll have items up in, say, a tower of some kind someone else has to go get. If you've got 3D terrain in your store already, excellent. If you don't, the game could be played with just flat terrain if you have some mousepad terrain laying around, but it's definitely not ideal. Luckily, there are a lot of cheap alternatives that players can get. So players are going to often want to buy the really nice detailed plastic and resin terrain kits that you can find out there. Paint them up themselves and so you're going to create their own world. But there are things like Tinker Turf. If you haven't seen Tinker Turf yet, Tinker Turf kickstarted, I believe, last year or the year before, and it's been available at retail for some time now. And it's basically pre-printed material that comes out on cardstock that you can punch out, and it's got instructions of how it fits together. And then it makes really, really sturdy pieces that are capable of holding 50mm metal miniatures, for example. It's a great way to build a battlefield very, very quickly. And this game is best played when you have a battlefield that is dynamic and looks good. As a spectacle in your store, this is also going to look great. These are the kind of tables that are going to draw people over to come see them. And again, your imagination and the player's imagination is really the limit. You want to build a volcano table? Go crazy. You want to build an ice table? Go crazy. You want to build a city, a factory, inside a spaceship, whatever you want. The rules, the terrain rules in the game, they're very defined as to what terrain does and what this kind of, like a heavy cover versus light cover does. But they're very easy. I think they fit onto 2 pages, if I'm not mistaken. And it gives players ideas of, these are the kind of things that would be considered heavy. These are the kind of things that would be considered a forest, even if it's not necessarily trees. These are the kind of things you would consider to be a forest, and so on and so forth. So whatever it is you want to build, you can build in that way. This works great at the skirmish level as well as it does the full-size level. Now, I've mentioned a couple times that this game is going to be scenario-driven. Inside the core game box, players are going to get a selection of scenarios for the full battle game as well as the skirmish battle game. They're different scenarios because the game has to be balanced differently between the two. And we're going to be supporting the game through more and more scenarios specifically for organized play at retail stores. And this is a major way that we intend to support the game, is through organized play at retail level stores. Now, we're expecting the organized play for this to come out probably September, October is the current plan. With the global pandemic, not as many people working in the office, things going on, some stuff did get delayed, but it will be out as soon as we can get it out, definitely before the end of this year. So we're going to have Evergreen organized play and then seasonal organized play. Our Evergreen organized play is going to be sort of your basic level event. This is you want to get some players together. They want to play for a few rounds, however many that they want to do, maybe till there's an undefeated player, or maybe you set it to say there can only be 3 rounds is all we have time for. It has all the timing rules of how long a round should last. And there's going to be 3 main formats we support in this. Skirmish level, which somebody could buy their battle box, their starter box, and get going. The full size for your people that have larger army collections. And then one of the main ones we're looking at sort of supporting, especially going forward, is going to be an escalation style event. This will be something where, say, you run a 3-round event. The round 1 would be skirmish level. Round 2 would be a midway level, let's say between 8 and 12 units. And then round 3 would be the full-size army level. The players would have to use whatever was in their skirmish they played in round 1 in the next level, and then all those models in the next level. So you're sort of building up as you go. It's sort of like a journeyman league, for those of you who play War Machine Hordes, to run those, a slow grow league in a single event. And a lot of the narrative organized play, like such as leagues and storyline events that we're going to put it out, are going to follow that. Now, that event format, that sort of basic event format is our Evergreen. Run this anytime. It doesn't matter. It's not tied to any specific event. But the vast majority of the organized play is going to be casual, narrative, story-driven organized play, either leagues that'll typically run a couple weeks to a month, or single-day events, often celebrating, say, the release of a new faction. These all have new scenarios in them, new ways to play, allow us to really mess around with the game, the way the game works. Because again, there is no just single win condition in Warcaster. It's not just I kill all your guys, you kill all my guys. You always have to play some scenario. And so changing that will change the way every single game feels, creating a lot of replayability. And that's one thing we're looking for. Between the customization of the Warjacks, this growing library of scenarios that we're going to be introducing through the organized play, we're looking at a game that is highly replayable. Now, in terms of how long it takes to play, at the skirmish level, the first time a player plays it, when they're reading the rule book and they're trying to figure out what they're doing, probably an hour and a half, to be honest. But as they play more and more and get their hands around it, I'd say a skirmish level game, you're looking at about an hour. I believe that we have used the clock currently, if you're running an event, to put skirmish level at about an hour and a half total per round, just to give all the players the time they need. Now, full-size games are a much longer ordeal. You're looking at probably a 3-hour game there, and this is for those players that want to sit down and play a much bigger game, where they're going to sit down and make an evening of it. And they could go even higher if they wanted to. Now, most of the miniatures are made out of metal. There are some resin bits. So we launched back with War Machine back with metal miniatures, and it's something that we continue to do because we do most of the miniatures here in Washington State. All the mold making, all the design of everything is done. And so these miniatures are being cast at our warehouse and shipped out. So I would not be expecting any sort of hard plastics for this line. It will almost be exclusively metal and resin. The miniatures are designed to go together very easily. So putting them together and magnetizing them, as I mentioned earlier, it's going to be easy for even the most novice hobbyist. This is also a great thing to run for people first getting into it, is going to be hobby days at your store. I know a ton of stores do that. It always seems to be super popular. And I think, again, just to bring it back, the magnetization, running a seminar or a hobby day on magnetization is going to be a very fun draw for Warcaster. And it's a skill that just relates to a lot of other games out there. It's something that if players don't do, it's something that they can learn how to do, and they'll get a lot of value out of. And I think they'll get a lot of appreciation for being taught on how to do it. So this is all launching again in August 2020. Expect the organized play a few months after, and then we're having releases basically every month after. You're going to see more expansions, more models. We've shown off concept art for vehicles, which vehicles will be coming up in the future. Vehicles are going to be customizable just like Warjacks. There are going to be new factions released later on in the game. This is something that we're going to continue supporting for a long time, because for us, this is the fourth pillar, basically. War Machine and Hordes was the first. Riot Quest and Monsterpocalypse were the next two pillars of sort of our main foundation games. Warcaster is the fourth. That way, we're really hitting all the different categories. Riot Quest, we've got the family fun, casual board game crowd, something you could play in 30 minutes and just have a blast. Monpoc for that more competitive head-to-head sort of miniature board game experience. Also the kaiju genre, which there's not a lot of kaiju miniatures games out there. And then we have War Machine and then Warcaster for our two main tabletop war games if somebody wants more fantasy or if they want more sci-fi. Also model count. War Machine is going to be a higher model count game overall than Warcaster will be. So with all these built, it's going to be supported, as I mentioned, for quite some time. It's a lifestyle game, in our opinion, which is that a player's typically going to, once they invest, they're going to keep investing in it. You know, a board game, somebody buys the board game, maybe they buy a couple of the expansions. But with our tabletop board games, we find that most players spend between $2,000 to $3,000 across the entirety of their career in the game. This is just them buying either the entirety of the faction they enjoy or eventually branching out and getting other factions. So that's the main stuff we wanted to mention, everybody. Also, how we would be supporting you. Also, we hope that the miniature that you all receive for this is just a great thing to put up in your store to show people, hopefully generate some interest. And Oz, is there anything that you wanted to add that I may have forgotten to mention, because it is early?
No, you hit on everything that was on my list.
Excellent. I get to keep my job for another day. That's my boss. So if I mess up, he's just sitting here watching me. So yeah, let's see if we had any questions that popped up, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks very much. I'm really excited about Warcaster from a merchandising point of view, where you're hitting on not only the player of the game, but also the collector as well as the customizer. And there are SKUs in the line built in that are intended entirely for the customization of those warjacks. So that's really smart marketing, really good planning on your part. One question that is in the chat is the question about play mats being available for additional merchandising, similar to what you've done with the mats for Riot Quest and Monsterpocalypse. Are there plans to produce play mat kind of game area mats for this game as well?
Yes. Yes, there will be neoprene game mats. I believe the first one coming out is going to be 30 by 30. Oz, do you remember if there's going to be a 48 by 48 of that one as well?
All I know for sure is that, well, your screen just turned really white.
Sorry. I'll fix it.
Is that we were going to do that 30 by 31 first.
Got it. Okay, I'm going to turn my share screen off here.
I got you there. I got you taken care of, Will.
Thank you.
Okay.
No problem.
Yeah, but yes, there absolutely will be neoprene mats, and we're going to put up more. But again, we're being careful with those because if we put out, say, a lava map or an ice map, that really does sort of dictate the way that players are going to go on that map. We do want to have that for people that want it. We know there will be a market for it, but we're really trying to push the creativity of what the players can create using really anything they can get in your store. There's so many different terrain kits available from so many different lines that somebody could build an old Wild West planet if they felt like it. And so we want them to come to you and say, I'm trying to build this, and just get creative. Go to the shelf and be like, this, and this, and just make a table, right?
Yeah, and there's a question about customization, asking about the magnets. Are they available from GTS? And yes, they are. We have all the customization tools you could use as well. I'm happy to put those SKUs in the questions here, and or in the chat window rather, and then I'll also add them to the YouTube video when this goes out, so that all those are available. Will also mention TinkerTurf, which is another supporting brand that GTS is carrying as well. So those orders are actually due for the June releases. The product that's already kind of in their pipeline for release, coming out here shortly. Those orders are due actually for tomorrow for the TinkerTurf. So if you want to take a look at those, you can. There's a link in the chat window, and you can also look on the GTS website. A couple of questions that I had. For the retailers, if you have questions, please feel free to go ahead and put your questions in the chat window. I mentioned it earlier, but for those of you just joining us or joining us late who maybe didn't see that, if you roll your mouse over your screen, you'll see that the chat window pops up at the bottom, a little button at the bottom. You click on that, that opens the chat, and then you can start typing in the chat window to the right. You can either detail that message to the panelists only, which is Will, Oz, and myself, or you can put it to all panelists and attendees, and everyone will see it. I will also just mention that the 3 starter sets that are coming out in August are part of the GTS demo program. So stores will be able to purchase 2 of those at 75% off of MSRP for the purposes of demoing the product. They'll come with a demo sticker. You'll be able to paint them and put them together as a display, and also for purposes of demo. Julio asks, TinkerTurf looks great. Is that part of Privateer or a different company? I believe that it is an entirely separate company, but they have been using Warcaster to promote their products, and I think that Privateer has also used some of the TinkerTurf product in their advertising as well. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yeah. So TinkerTurf's run by Lane, a longtime friend of the company. We've worked on other projects before, and in fact, we did most of our internal play testing using TinkerTurf.
Yeah, he loaned us a giant tub.
Yeah, he literally showed up with a giant plastic tub full of the stuff, and we used that for all the tables in our playtest area in the offices. And that's why I can definitely attest to it being great stuff, because again, with this game being so dynamic, you're going to have situations where you might have 3 or 4 metal 50 millimeter warjacks standing on a piece of terrain that's a raised catwalk. And underneath that, you've got 2 squads of miniatures fighting. And nobody wants their terrain to collapse and destroy all your painted miniatures. And so we definitely had the weight test occur. And we're talking months and months and months of play test. So in terms of wear and tear, they just stood up really well.
There was a question. Manuel came in late and he asks, how many minis come in the starter?
5, generally.
Yeah, generally, it's going to be 5 miniatures in the starter. You'll get a squad, which is 3 miniatures to a squad. You'll get 2 solos, which are single miniatures, and then you'll get 1 warjack. The warjack in the box will have some of its customization options out of the box. Usually about 5 weapons come in the box, and most of the jacks can only have a left arm, right arm, and a shoulder of some kind. Those weapon packs for $10 will allow you to add on. But the base level, the lowest level you can play the game is 4 units, and you get 5 in the starter box. The skirmish mode, which is the 30 by 30 in 30-inch by 30-inch table, which is a format we'll be supporting, is 8 units. So a customer that comes in and buys a command starter needs to basically buy 3 more blisters worth of stuff, and they'll have the maximum you could run in a skirmish level event.
Yeah. And like we were talking about right before the video started, the September solicitation that just went live is showing the wild cards for the first time, and those are like our mercenaries for the game. So every wild card will play in 2 factions. So like Baron Morgrave is a little bit evil. So he's for the Aeturnus Continuum, but he's also for the Iron Star Alliance because he's a Baron in the Alliance. And so those products also have a lot of crossover appeal for multiple players if they're playing single factions.
Are the products in the starter different than the other products that are releasing at the same time, or are they the same products?
So there's some stuff that's going to be duplicate releases, and then there's some stuff that's going to be standalones. Like the engineer for the Marcher Worlds is not, he's a new solo. He's not in the starter box.
But for example, the Weaver, right?
Yeah.
There'll be another Weaver sold the same month as a starter who has the same Weaver that's in the box. Quick note for anybody buying it in your store on if somebody asks how many of any one thing should I buy, the cap in the game is you can only run 4 of the same exact thing. So if say there's 2 different Weaver solos, they have different names on the blister. A player could run 4 of one of those and 4 of the other. If they're a named hero, which the blister will often say hero on it, you can only have 1 of those. Those are usually characters, and the rules in the game say named characters you can only have 1 of. The one thing that you'll probably get a lot of questions about, that just so you're armed with the information, is warjacks, right? These warjacks, they have all this customization and all the different things they can do with left arm, right arm. So the Dusk Wolf is one name of one of the warjacks. And someone's like, well, if I build 4 Dusk Wolves with flamethrowers and I build 4 Dusk Wolves with railguns, can I run 4 of each because they have different weapons? And the answer is no. You only run 4 of anything of the same name. So if you have 4, say, Dusk Wolf warjacks, no matter how the player customizes them or uses their magnets to change the weapons and so on for, you only have 4 of that chassis. So that's just an easy hard cap for a player. Also, just design-wise, what it does is if there ends up being something that, the players immediately flock to and go, oh, this thing's the best thing in the game, run 15 of them. You can't.
Yeah.
You're only going to be able to run 4 at most.
Gotcha. Any plans to do a crossover Warcaster RPG at this point, or is that something potentially in the future?
No plans at this time, or no plans announced.
We don't talk about unannounced plans. Is the standard answer for that kind of thing.
Okay.
It would be cool, right? Sci-fi RPGs are dope, but nothing we can say.
Yeah.
All right. Is there a separately purchasable rulebook, or is it in the starter and also online kind of thing?
It's in the starter and also online for free. So anybody who wants more information, you can go to warcaster.com. No hyphen, no space, just warcaster.com. That is the main landing page. And that's where more information will continue to show up. So people that want to read a quick little blurb about the history and the setting and see more pictures of the miniatures and more information that shows up. More importantly, when a player wants to look at the rule book, maybe somebody who's interested in the miniatures, they're like, I want to see what the game's like. And, you know, you're busy. You don't have time to do a demo or whatever's going on. You can just send them to warcaster.com and they can just read the rule book. Another resource is Oz and I stream at Privateer Press. Before the pandemic, we were streaming at least twice a week.
When the world is normal.
We will return to that. But before we were all sent home, that was during the period that we were able to do battle reports on Warcaster. So all of our videos that we stream on Twitch through the Privateer channel, they end up on our YouTube. And we have it's youtube.com/privateerpressprime. That YouTube channel is full of battle reports, tutorials, and painting tutorials. And we definitely have full playthroughs of Warcaster. Oz and I's first game, I think we took 2 hours to do the game because we stopped and talked to everybody live and just went through how does this game play. And that can be a really good resource. If people don't want to sit there and read the rulebook on warcaster.com, you can say, hey, go check out Privateer Press's YouTube channel. They're going to have a wealth of information for you, and they can just sit there and watch it while they're doing something else, working, painting. You can just have it on the background, or they can watch it intently if they want to look at our faces for 2 hours, but nobody wants that.
Okay, and Jeff McCann asks, are all the bases on the models set up for magnets also? Can they be magnetized?
The bases, you could. It depends on the connection point of the model. I will say that the engineering of these miniatures definitely went for magnetization of the weapons because it's such a gameplay mechanic. It was not done for things like feet to bases. So miniatures that have a more flat area, such as I'd say the warjacks, for example, you probably could quite easily, but some of those squads and those infantry, like we definitely like our dynamic poses at Privateer Press. We definitely like people in running and moving around. Some of them have a little bit more static pose where you could do it, but I think it wouldn't be as easy for them, especially with a smaller connection point on the foot.
Yeah, for the most part, they would be glued or pinned in place.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. I'm not going to ask that because you won't tell me, so I'll just hold off on answering any questions on unannounced plans. So just so everyone knows, there are 23 SKUs releasing in August, which include the starter sets, solos. It looks like small group, like the Paladin Enforcers would be
the squads.
Yeah. Small squad, like 3 models.
Yes.
Okay. And then you also have the Warjacks, as well as the 2 expansion packs for weapons on the Warjacks and the Void Gates. Mm-hmm. And then the September releases, there's 11 SKUs releasing listed right now, which is it looks like the wild cards, as well as a different or a variant Warjack for each of the 3 announced factions. So any future factions, do we have a timeline for the 4th faction coming into the game?
Go ahead, Oz.
We don't have a public timeline on it, but you might hear something about that really soon.
Okay.
In the future.
I'll take that.
And I see Richard Toombs in the chat says, will there be organized play like Steamroller events? Definitely. That's one of the things I was talking about earlier in the presentation, is that we're going to have 2 main forms of organized play. I'll briefly recap. There's going to be an Evergreen organized play like Steamroller that allows people to run one of 3 different formats: skirmish level, which is between 4 to 8 units, full size, which is up to 15. And then one of the main ones we'll be pushing is Escalation, which will be, say you run a 3-round event. Round 1 would be skirmish. Round 2 would be somewhere in between, and round 3 would be full battle. Full battle games can last a long time. Skirmish games are about an hour, hour and a half. So you can run a skirmish level event in your store within a day, easy. Full size, if you got the time, you absolutely could. But what an escalation event will allow you to do, and your customers to do, is to play with all of their collection and all the models they've made in their full-size army, but still fit it into a day by basically tapering it and starting at skirmish and then working up to the full size over the course of the event. Also, it's just a really fun list building exercise, as you have to keep the same models in each block as you work your way up. Mm-hmm. Aside from that, we're going to have a ton of seasonal organized play. We're talking league, we're talking single day release events. And one of the big things about those, because the game is purely scenario driven, every one of those is going to have new scenarios. and they completely changed up the way you play the game. Because unlike War Machine, there is not a kill the caster win condition. You have to win on whatever the scenario is. So expect leagues, expect release events, expect a ton of that, and we're really going to really experiment on what that means for this game. We have some stuff that we can't talk about yet, but we have some really big plans for players getting together and having extended play at your store and what they can do with their armies.
Great. Julio says he doesn't normally like war games, but Warcaster looks and sounds nice. So great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We tried to design this game from a new perspective. Like Hungerford said early in the presentation, a lot of standard miniatures war games are, I put my giant army on the table, you put your giant army on the table, we figure out stuff. But this game is about reaction and responses to what's going on. And it's about a weird kind of mobility, because your new stuff is teleporting on the table where your old stuff dropped gates and that kind of thing. So it's not just two armies marching toward a clash in the center. It's, oh, I want to go grab that box over there and run it back to this whatever, this processing station to, turn it into gold or whatever. Although we use sci-fi terms in all those things.
I was gonna say,
you're not just grabbing a box of gold and making it into something. You're grabbing some sort of weird esoteric stuff. But all that movement feels a lot different from the way a standard war game would be played. And the fact that your models are never really dead unless they're heroes, unless they're those characters. The characters tend to be a bit more powerful than other models. So like Wojtek Sudal, the bounty hunter that works for the Marcher Worlds and the Iron Star, he's a much more impactful piece, because when he's gone forever. But your Ranger Fire team, the squad that comes in the Marcher World starter box, every time those models are all three off the table, then they can pop back out of a new gate, because they've been beamed back to the ship, to the med bay or whatever, or there's fresh squads just raring to go. However you want to imagine it narratively is happening.
But yeah, and for those of you who joined a little bit later, that's one thing we were talking about early on, was this idea, and just to reiterate what Oz was saying, is that you can't be tabled in the game. That's a big player experience thing. Some people build their army, sit down, and bad dice rolls, bad luck, bad decisions, all of a sudden turn 2 and they have no miniatures left. You can't do that in this game. It plays a lot more like a real-time strategy game, like StarCraft Command and Conquer, where as long as you've got the resources, you can click the button and down come your troops. And you, like I said, you can only win or lose on the scenario. So as a player, you can push someone back and put them in an unfavorable position, and that's how you're going to win, right? Is killing the guys around the thing you're fighting over, and then making them have to sort of teleport back and make their way back over there, but maybe they don't have enough time or they can't get to it. It's a game all about positioning and standing in the right place, and it's interesting because it leads to a new type of tactical thinking for your wargamers. Often a lot of people will build for attrition. They'll be like, my army has got superior firepower. It's like, what does your army do? I kill you. Like, that's all I do, right? They're like, oh, how do you grab scenarios or objectives? I don't. I just kill you. Can't really do that in Warcaster. And knowing that your opponent can always come back and always be teleporting new people in. They could be teleporting them in different parts of the battlefield depending on where they got their gates out to. They could be teleporting on your side of the table if they got gates down there. It leads to a new approach to gameplay that I don't think exists really on the market right now. And that's one of the big things that Warcaster has going for it, is a very fresh approach to tabletop wargaming.
Right. Yeah, I am really excited about it. I appreciate all the intentionality that went into the design and setting it up so that the full table is getting used. You've got customization options for all the different types of hobbyists we have in this industry. And I think just a great product line. Just to reiterate, those of you attending the call live today will be eligible to receive the Warcaster alternate sculpt Weaver solo. I'm not sure which one that is, but
it's the Marcher Worlds. It's the one from the Rebel box.
That's the one with where she's got her helmet off, right?
Yeah, we've shown that. We've shown that in a few different places. It was going to be the exclusive at Adepticon, but that didn't happen. So yeah, you can find. I'm sure that if you don't have an image of that, Scott, we can email one to you. But yeah,
okay, I'll make sure that I get that from you, or I find it out there. There are no more questions in the chat window, so I would just encourage our retailers. get in line for the demo program from GTS. You'll be able to get 2 of these starters to lay out on the table and put those to work in your store to help support the game. There's OP coming. There's opportunities for painting, for running painting events, running customization events, running terrain building events. There's just a lot of things you can do around these miniature lines to really increase the number of people coming into your store, the amount of engagement you have in your store. So great opportunities. I really appreciate Oz and Will taking the time out of their day to be here. Thank you, retailers, for taking the time out of your day to be here.
Thank you.
We know you're running a business in these crazy times and trying to get through it all. And we're here to support you guys. If you can reach out to us, if you have questions, if you want to reach out, please feel free to do so. This video will be going up on YouTube, so if you want to review it, if you missed something at the beginning, feel free to jump in, check that out. That should go up later today, possibly tomorrow morning, depending on how the day shakes out for me. So once again, thank you all for being here. Thank you for your time, and we look forward to supporting you in the future. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody. Stay safe out there.
Yeah, thanks.